What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Kilo Loco, and today we're going to be working with Flutter. So today is day 11 in hashtag 30 days of code, and we are going to be building out a weather app today. So we're going to actually be able to enter in the name of a city, go out to an API, make a networking request to an API, pull down some JSON, parse that JSON, and display the data to the screen. So with all that said, let's go ahead and jump right on in. So as you can see, I already have a little bit of the code built out just for our UI, and you can see that we are just simply working with a text field and a button so far. What we're going to do is we're going to be able to type in some type of city right here, search, and then we should be able to get back the information for the weather for that city. And we haven't implemented it, but it's going to be the information displayed up here. Let's go over to our browser, and we're going to start by bringing in the package that we're going to need, which is HTTP. If you're not familiar with HTTP, make sure you check out my last video where I'm talking about network requests. So we're going to grab HTTP, hit the installing like bam. We're going to grab it like bam. Go to pubspec. You already know it. YAML. And we're going to paste it in there. We're going to save it. Next, what I want to do is I want to open up the browser again, because now we need to go take a look at the API that we're going to be using. And I'm going to use Open Weather API. So you go ahead and type in Open Weather API. It's going to be this Open Weather map, and we're going to just go ahead and select this one, and it's going to bring you to a screen like this. Now we're going to be working with current weather data, but in order for you to do this, you're going to actually need to subscribe. It's completely free. I wouldn't show you how to do something if it wasn't free, but what we need to do is we need to get an API key. Now I've already signed up. All you have to do is enter in like a username, password, and that's pretty much it. And then I think you might have to confirm your email address, but there's no credit card involved. So just go ahead and sign up. All right, once you sign up, you might end up at a screen that looks like this, or maybe it looks a little bit different. Just go back up over to API. We're gonna once again choose the current weather API, and now we're gonna go to the API doc. So what we're gonna do is we want to go through and we wanna read a little bit about the API, figure out how it works. I'm obviously going to go through and show you how to do everything. But what I wanted to point out here is that you're going to need that API key. So that's why you need to actually sign up, because you're going to need to pass that in. So what we're going to do is we're going to be using this specific API, which is just going to be the openweathermap.org. And then we're going to get the weather path. And as you can see, it takes in a queue or a query, I'm guessing, and you can pass in a city name, and then you need to pass in your app ID. There's also a couple of other parameters that we can pass in. We're going to touch on that a little bit later. Right now, what we want to do is we just want to get everything working. So head back over to your project, and we're going to create a new file under lib, and we're going to call this data service. All right, so in our new data service file, we have a data service class, and we have a function on it called get weather. Now we are once again going to be working with HTTP, so let's go ahead and import that at the top as well. We're just going to do HTTP, and then we're going to get this one .dart, and we're going to cast it as HTTP so that we'll just interact with it like so. Now what we want to do is we want to actually create the URI of our API's endpoint. So let's do that. I'm going to go back over to the docs. You're going to want to keep going back and forth with the docs and make sure that you have everything in front of you, but we're going to grab the API, and then we're also going to grab all the information that we can, just so that we can see what we need to do and when we're constructing essentially our networking request. So I'll paste it in here, and now I'm going to create the URI for this endpoint. All right, so as you can see right here, we created our URI. Once again, for the first part, we're going to have just the base URL essentially. So it's going to be api.openweathermap.org. And then for the second part, we're going to pass in essentially the path. So everything with the slash and beyond. Then everything that is going to be a query parameter, which as you can see, anything that is a key and then equals, and then it's going to be the value separated by ampersands. Those are going to be our query parameters. So we have our query parameters right here. We have the Q, which is going to be what we're going to pass the city in, and then we have the app ID. Now first, what we want to do is we want to get weather for a city, and we need to pass in the actual city. So we'll say that this function is going to take an argument called city, and then we can just replace our query parameters value for Q with the city. Next, we need the app ID. Now you can feel free to go ahead and try to use my app ID, but I'm going to guess that a lot of people are going to use it and then they're going to end up shutting down my account. So it might be best for you to just use your own app ID, but do whatever you want. You're going to do you, and I ain't going to stop you. So go ahead and paste that in there. And now we should be all set to make that networking request. So let's go ahead and try to get this response. All right, so there we go. Now, a couple of modifications that I made. I marked our function with async. So the get weather is now an asynchronous function because we are going to be doing an await operation. It's an asynchronous operation right here when we do the get. And then we have our response, and we have the body, which is just the stringified version of the JSON. So now what we want to do is we want to actually print out this response. But in order to do that, we need to pass in a city. So let's go ahead and wire this up to our actual UI so that we can type something in and then get back the response for whatever we typed in. So over back in main, what we're going to do is we can see that we have a button already connected to a search function. All we need to do is we need to make an instance of our data service. So I'll create an instance of that data service and then call get weather. All right, so it's as simple as that. I have my instance of my data service right here, and then I'm just gonna, whenever I call search, I'm just gonna do data service dot get weather for whatever the city is that's typed in. So let's go ahead and save that, and then I'm gonna actually do a hot restart on my app. And when I pull it up, I live in the city of Yucaipa. And when I do a search, let's go ahead and run that, and let's see if we get anything printed out, and bam! Can you say bam? Because I can. Whoo, look at that. All right, so this is my city, and this is like all the information about like the weather and all the stuff. So it looks like everything that we're doing so far is working out perfectly. All right, that's good. That's good. So now what we want to do is we actually want to turn this JSON that we're getting back into actual objects that we can work with. So we want to be able to easily work with this data that we're interested in, because if we go back over to our weather API, we can see that there's some fields that we're going to need in order to like display the information, right? So we want to display a couple of things like the actual temperature, like what the temperature is at the current moment, right? So this is the JSON. This is example JSON of what we're going to get back. We want to have something like the temperature. We're gonna, like, maybe we want to get like the name back, right? And then like another thing would be like, let's see, maybe like the actual like weather description. It's a clear sky out right now, so that's really cool. So we want to get back these three things. Now, as you can see, when we have this example JSON that's listed out right here, all this data, these are some complex objects to parse. Like I want to point out that this weather, like we want to get like the description, right? And we want to actually like show the icon as well. But notice that this is nested inside of an object. And then on top of that, it's nested inside of an array. Real sneaky like. Look at that. So sneaky. I don't know why they did that, but it's in there. So we have to actually parse the array, parse the object in order to get those values. Same thing goes with the actual temperature. Look at the temperatures right here, but it's under this object that has a value, or it's under this main keyword, which has a value of an object. So we need to parse that object. So what I'm going to do to just get you started with parsing is we're going to do something on the first level of the entire object, which is name. Their name is not wrapped in any other objects or anything like that. So we're going to parse out name, and you're going to see how it's done when everything is at the first level. And then we're going to start drilling down. I'm going to show you how to get the temperature, which is in the second level. And then we can get like the description, which is like a third level down, right? So let's start with name. Oh, actually, another good thing to do is to go ahead and copy this JSON and just put it into your project so that you can reference it like right there. We don't have to keep flipping back and forth. So I'm going to create a new file, and this is going to be called, we could call it just like models. So, we got them models. And now what I want to do is I want to have all my JSON that we just copied in here inside of some comments. So what I'll do is I'm going to do some multi-line comments like so. This is how you do multi-line comments. Now in the middle of those two stars, we're just going to paste it in. And now all this code is just going to be commented out, and we can just like refer to it whenever we want. We can obviously delete stuff too, but nothing in here is actually going to be ran. So let's go ahead and delete some of the stuff that we don't need, just so that we can, so that it's a little bit easier to get the information that we do need. So we're interested in the name. That's going to be the first thing that we parse out. We're interested in main, right? Because we need the temperature. We don't need base. Don't need that. Get it out of my face. And we're not going to be doing anything with the coordinates either. So this is essentially what we're working with. And then even then, like, I'm not even going to use any of this. And we'll use those two, but we won't need any of this. So now it's like really easy to see, like, okay, how am I going to parse this information out? This is everything that I'm interested in. And once again, name is on the first level, so it's the easiest thing to go after first. So every time that we see these curly braces, you're going to kind of, what I do, you don't have to think this way, but what I do is I think of, that means that I need to have an object to represent that thing. So anytime I see curly braces in JSON, that means that's an object. So that means that this would be an object and this would be an object. So that means that I need to have 3 objects to represent the JSON that we're going to be working with. Let's start with one. So I'm going to create a new object that is going to be called weather response. All right, so we have weather response. So that's going to represent everything that's in here. Now we want to go after the name first, right? So then I need to have a property called name, or I mean, you could actually call it whatever you want, but we need to understand that we need to parse something. We need to parse the JSON for the word name and then store that property if we're going to be using it later. All right, here we go. So we have this new weather response object. It has a property on it called city name, which is of type string, right? And we have our current constructor. Like, we always need a constructor for our objects, but this isn't actually going to be the constructor that we're going to be working with. And the reason for that is because we're actually working with JSON. If we knew the city name, then we could pass it in manually and we would just do that. But we don't. We need to parse it out of the JSON. We need to pull that information out of the JSON. And what we'll do in order to do that is we'll create a new constructor, a factory constructor that allows us to do that. So I'm going to build out the factory constructor and then I'll go back over what's happening in there. All right, so here we go. Now we have a factory constructor. Whenever you see the word factory, just know that it means that you're building a constructor, like a custom constructor, where you're going to pass something in and you're going to have some logic in order to create that object that you have the factory inside of. So in this case, we have a factory that's going to create a weather response. And that means that we need to, at the end of the day, we need to still return a weather response object, and you need to create that weather response object with the original constructor. So just keep that in mind. So now we have this kind of interesting, language pattern where you have the name of the object, and then you could give it, you could give the actual constructor name whatever you want, right? We've done this before where, like, even in our data service, we had a different constructor with a different name, right? We have URI with HTTPS. They did something like this, a factory constructor, in order to implement that. So you can call it whatever you want, but this is pretty straightforward. It's from JSON. And keep in mind that JSON is actually a map. So you can think of JSON as a map or a dictionary or a collection of objects where you're able to look something up by the key. In this case, the key is going to be a string. And then the value, we actually don't know what the value is. And the reason we don't know the value, what the value is because this value is a string. this value is a dictionary or a map, and then this value is like a list or an array. So like there's all kinds of different values. So that's why we use the keyword dynamic. And then we're just going to say that, we're going to give it the name JSON. So our JSON is going to be of type map, string, and dynamic. So since our JSON is a map, right, a key value collection, we can look up the property, or we can look up the value for the keyword name. Now this value right here needs to match exactly what's in the JSON. It has to be spelled exactly the same. If there's capital letters, it needs capital letters. If it has an underscore, it needs an underscore. Exactly the same. So then we're saying make city name equal to whatever the value is for JSON name, right? The value for name under the JSON dictionary. We're going to get that, and then we're going to pass that into city name right here. So then we're returning our weather response and thus making a weather response object with this constructor right there. So now back over in our data service, what we can do is, so now that we have our JSON, which is essentially this response right here, or the response body right here, we can just pass the body into our weather response object with that constructor from JSON and return that weather response as the return type up here. All right, so as you can see, we made a couple of changes. Our getWeather function now returns a future weather response, right? And once again, it's future because, we got that await up in there and we're trying to return an object. So now we have our future, now we are in the future and we have our JSON, and we're creating that JSON by decoding the response body. And then once we have that, we can pass this JSON into our from JSON object. Now let's go ahead and save that. Now over in our main.dart, let's go ahead and get the response. We'll say final is our final response, right? Or we could do like weather response if you want, but let's keep it short for today. And we'll actually be able to print out the response. And remember, since this is a weather response object, we'll actually be able to access any of the keys, which we have. In this case, we want to print out the city name. So, and we also need to mark this with await. So we got to do that too, right? We got to do that because it's an asynchronous function. Remember that? So async like so, we have the city name and we're going to simply print it out. So let's go ahead and save that. We'll run the app, or we'll restart the app again. And now if I were to type in something like Mumbai, we can do search and we can see that we have some more information. So like you can see the country is India, we have like the temperature, but we have the name being printed out right here, which is Mumbai. So everything's looking really good so far. Now what I want to do is I want to go back over to my models.dart file, my models, right? And we want to parse out the actual temperature. That's like the most important thing to get out of that, right? And remember what I said, every time you see curly braces, or at least this is how I think, every time I see curly braces, I think I need to create an object for that. So I'm going to create one that's going to be called temperature info. So here you can see I have this new temperature info object, and it's going to be of type double. I know that it's of type double because it doesn't have the quotes around it, the double quotes. So whenever you see double quotes, that means that it's a string, right? So we want to parse it as a double, and we need to keep that in mind whenever we're going to parse this information in our from JSON constructor that we're about to create. So it's pretty much the same exact process that we did right here, right? We're going to be working with a map of string and dynamic because the keys are string, the value is dynamic. I mean, we could specify that we know that it's going to be a double right there, but if there was another object if there was another property in our object that wasn't a double, then that would actually cause a crash and we wouldn't be able to, work with that data. So it's better to just keep working with string dynamics and then parse it, at that single layer or at that single level, if you don't know exactly what the JSON might look like in the future. So let's add in our from JSON constructor. All right, so simple enough, nothing too crazy going on here. Once again, we're planning on working with JSON, and it's a map, so we could just simply pass in the key that we're looking for. In this case, it's temp, and we can verify that by seeing that we are spelling it exactly correct. And then I have the temperature. I pass it into our temperature info constructor, our regular constructor right here. And now we have a temperature info object. So now what we'll do is we'll update our weather response to actually have a new property called temp info. All right, so our weather response now is going to have a temperature info object, and we just need to make sure that we're updating our from JSON constructor as well. But remember, we need to make sure that we're passing in the correct type of JSON, right? Because now if I were to pass in this same JSON right here, this entire object, and I were to search for the keyword temp, it doesn't have temp at that level. So what I need to do is I need to parse this JSON and get the value for main, and that is going to give me back some more JSON, and that's the JSON that I want to pass into our constructor, our from JSON constructor, so that it actually has access to the keyword temp. So let's make sure that we do that in our from JSON constructor for our weather response. All right, and there we go. So now we have the temp info JSON because we're parsing whatever value we're getting back from main. And then we're going to pass the temp info JSON into our temperature info from JSON constructor. And that's going to give us a temp info object, which we can pass into the weather response constructor. Now we need to do the same thing with this weather info. So as you can see, it's going to be an array. Now you could make an object that encapsulates the array, but it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. What I'm going to do is I'm going to parse out the weather keyword. That's going to give me back an array. Then what I'll do, since I know that there's only going to ever be like one object in here, I've played with this API in the past. I've never seen two come in, and I wouldn't even know what to do with the second one, to be honest. But we have this object in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get the first value inside of this array, so I can just grab the 0 index. So let's go ahead and create a new weather info object and create a from JSON constructor as well. All right, so as you can see, we have this weather info object. It's going to have the description and icon, just like we have right here. And then we have our constructor, our regular constructor. We have our factory constructor, which is from JSON, same business as last time. Nothing gonna change. Now we are going to be parsing out two properties from this object, right? 1, 2. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. We want description, we want icon, and then we're going to create our weather info object. So notice that we're not working with the array at this level. So that means that when we're going to parse it out in our weather response object in our from JSON, we're going to need to do that parse of the array at this level. So let's make sure that we update that as well. All right, so a couple of different changes going on right here. So once again, we know that the value for weather is going to be an array of objects. So we're actually going to turn that, we're actually going to get the first index of that array, and that's going to be the JSON that we're looking for. We'll pass that weather info JSON into our weather info from JSON constructor, and then we'll be able to pass our weather info into the weather info argument that was added up here in our class and in the constructor as well. So now, let's head back over to our Dart service, and nothing really needs to change right here because we're able to create this weather response from that JSON. And then over here in our main.dart, we can just add a couple more print statements to just, see the different values being printed out. So one of them was the temp info, and that was going to be the temperature, right? We want to print the temperature out. And then we also wanted to, maybe print out the weather info, and we wanted to see the description, right? So let's go ahead and save that. And I'll just do a hot restart, and then we pass in a city again, Ukaipa. I'll do search, and then we can see that we have UKIPA, we have the temperature, which is 285. That's definitely not Fahrenheit, because I know it's hot in California, but oh my, that's a little bit too hot. And then we can see that the description is clear sky. So before we move on and start working with the UI, what I want to do is I want to make sure that this is going to be in the correct units for my area. And in the States, we follow the imperial system. So what we're going to do is we're going to look back at our API and we figure out how can we do that. Well, we can see that there's this parameter, this optional parameter called units. So if we go ahead and pass units in, and then we specify what type of units we want to the information to come back in, then we don't even have to do the conversion locally. So let's go back over to our data service. We're going to update our query parameters to have a new key called units, and the value is going to be imperial, like so. And if I save it and we go back over to our app and I do search again, we should see that now it's 54 degrees outside, which sounds about right. I mean, it's pretty close. I don't think it's that cold, but we'll see what happens. Anyways, now we have all the information that we can need. All we have to do is we just hang on to the relevant information. Now, whether you want to hang on to the whole response or not, that's totally up to you. But I'm going to hang on to the actual response in our main.dart. So let's go ahead and hang on to that in a property on our my app state. So we have our response that we're going to be hanging on to right there. And now we can go ahead and delete all the print statements, and we're going to be basing our UI based off of this response. So you know what that means. You know what that means. We got to set that state, boy. So let's go ahead and set our state, and we'll just simply do a good old arrow function where we're saying our response is equal to our response. Simple, easy peasy, lemon to the squeezy. So now we can actually start working with the UI that we want to display. So I'm actually going to be working inside of this column, inside of the children. Let's go ahead and add an if statement. And if we're able to get back the response, if the response has a value and it's not null, then let's go ahead and show the actual temperature in like large font, and then the description as well. All right, so as you can see, we have this if statement. Now, if statement, I believe, can only take in one child, or can do like, yeah, essentially just one widget that it could work with. And I decided to wrap it in a column so that we can work with two different text. So the first text is going to be in large font. You can see that right here, and it's going to show our response temperature info temperature, and then it's going to have like the little degree sign right there. And then right below it is going to be the actual description of our weather, so like clear sky or whatever. So now if I go ahead and do a hot restart, open up the app, and once again I enter in Mumbai, right? And we run this, we can see that it's 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and it looks like the description is coming back as smoke. So now we're pretty good, right? We have our weather app working. You can type in a city, it's going to come back, you know, assuming that you enter in a relevant city. You could definitely take a look at the API, choose states and things like that. But what we actually want to have is an image in here, right? We want it to look big, sexy with an image. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to download an image. Now, if we go back over to the API and we scroll down over to the different, let's see, the different list of condition codes, right? You can actually see that there is a list of weather condition codes right here. If you click on it, it takes you to this screen and it shows you all the different icons that they already have built in. And all you really need to do is get this URL. So if you want, you can actually download the image that they provide. All you need to do is pass in the icon, which is why we have the icon in our weather info object, right? So we're getting back our icon. We just pass that in right here. Well, specifically in this little area right there, and then we can get back the correct image. So let's head back over to our code base, And over in models, what we're gonna do is, instead of putting it right here, our weather info, and adding in something like, you know, the URL, it would actually be a little bit cleaner if we could just get the URL, the image URL from the weather response, right? So we can actually do a computed property and get that value from our weather info. So let's do that now. All right, so as you can see, we just made a getter for this property called icon URL. It's a computed property, and it's returning back this string. Now, we don't want to return back this hard-coded string. What we actually want to do is we want to update this value right here, which is the icon that we're getting back in our weather info. So to do that, we can use string interpolation, and we can simply pass in weather info like that dot icon. So now we'll have a dynamic icon to show, and it's actually extremely easy to show a remote image in our column by just simply doing image dot network, and then we pass in the response dot icon URL. Simple as that. So now if we do save, and we actually have to reload our app, and let's see if we can get it to fire up for us right here. So then I'll type in Ukaipa again, and we do search, and it looks like we have a problem. And the problem is because we actually are not on a secure connection. So let's go ahead and go back over to our models. Let's add a S right here because I believe that we can support a secure connection. And if we go back over to our app, now we can see that we have the actual icon. So once again, let's try Mumbai, and we can search, and we get back the icon, and we see that it's smoke. So this is the icon for smoke. Let's do maybe New York, like so. And we do search, and we can see that it's just like, I don't know what this is, a clear slide. I guess that's supposed to be the moon. I don't know what kind of moon that is, but hey, we didn't have to make the icon. So that's going to be it for today. I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope that it wasn't too long, but it's a really cool thing to be able to actually go out to the internet, get some information from an API, and display some real data. In this case, we were working with a weather API. We can type in a city, we can get back the information, we could get a description, we could get a temperature, we could get the icon for that location. And I think that's really cool. If you enjoyed this video and you want to learn more, make sure that you subscribe. We're going to be having a whole lot more videos to come, especially since we're only halfway through hashtag 30 days of Flutter. We're not even actually halfway, but yeah, a lot more to come. So make sure you subscribe. If you found this video informative, then make sure that you like the video as well. So that's going to be it for today. Thank you for your time. Now go out there and keep coding passionately.